comrades and friends, brothers and sisters. Most of what I will be quoting here are from two books written by Elaine Morgan. The first and the most important book is entitled The Aquatic Ape Hypothesis. The second book is mostly her summation of her struggle to get a hearing, together with a summation of her arguments put forth in that original book. The new book is entitled The Naked Darwinist. Now to the talk. We've all seen numerous Nova television documentaries on the origin of our species. We've seen commentary on this subject for decades in books and magazines and on television. Yet never have I seen the obvious questions even asked, let alone answers to those questions. Over the years, I have wanted to scratch the itch on these very obvious questions about the origin of the human species, but not until I found Elaine Morgan's books was I presented finally with both those obvious questions and her answers that should have been obvious to anyone, not just a scientist. I'm indebted to her for what she's done in these books. It was tremendous. I highly recommend that you get a copy of Elaine Morgan's book, The Aquatic Ape Hypothesis. In the following, when I say quote, I will be reading a quote from one of these two books, and a good deal of the unquoted will still be paraphrases from her book, but with some additional thoughts added by me and some other thoughts that are not in the book. Here's a description from the book of the anthropologist's methodology, which is something I'm aware of. I think even you're aware of, but it's worth quoting because it is shocking, really, even though we know it. Quote, in order to construct their family trees, students are trained to concentrate on and evaluate all characteristics that are shared between related species. Any feature of any species which is not shared by any of its nearest kin is classified as autapomorphic, a one-off, an idiosyncrasy, and therefore useless, arbitrary, and irrelevant to the task at hand. To the committed systematicists, betraying a keen curiosity about an autapomorphic trait is a sign of scientific illiteracy. Unquote. Are you kidding? Charles Darwin would be rolling in his grave in shock at such a reactionary, anti-Darwinist statement. That statement is an attack on Darwinism by supposed Darwinists. Do you remember the famous stories of how Darwin studied the finches of the Galapagos? Did Darwin look for similarities, or did he look for differences that led to his creation of the theory of evolution? Darwin looked, for instance, to find even the most trivial differences in the finches' beaks from the different islands of the Galapagos and linked those differences to the differing environments on each separated island of each of the variety of finches. It was the differences not the similarities which led to Darwin developing the theory of evolution. If one is to look for the environment our original human ancestor existed in, it cannot be found in the bones, nor can it be found in the DNA. Yes, the bones and the DNA are wonderful scientific evidence as to our connections to other species. It is wonderful what they've developed in linking us in the tree of life. But the bones and DNA cannot tell us very much about our differences, which is so important, except in the most basic ways, in the most basic attributes. The bones and DNA cannot talk about that. So, when trying to understand the environment that our most distant ancestor lived in, where shall we look first, if not at the bones and the DNA? Well, we can only look at the human body that exists, which is ours. All we can do is dig up the bones of things from millions of years ago. We don't have bodies from then with the meat attached. And even then, it would be difficult to discern a lot. Our bodies, however, tell a great story, our human bodies today, about our ancestry. And that's how Darwin would have looked at it. Humans split away from the main branch of the primates prior to the split of the gorillas and the chimpanzees. So we're not directly evolved from the chimpanzees, as people probably think. Their original ancestors come after ours. Ours actually predates theirs. So we are in a separate line. Our original ancestor arrived about 5 to 6 million years ago, before the original ancestors of the gorillas and the chimps. And they arrived probably somewhere in the area of the East African Rift Valley, most likely in the area of the Afar Triangle, a very unique area at the northeast corner of Africa, where Djibouti, Eritrea, and Ethiopia come together near the very entrance to the Red Sea, opposite the Arabian Peninsula. Our human bodies did not come about by some freak accident. We have a very unique body. Yet our bodies are not only extremely different from any other primate, but distinctive in many unique, and I emphasize unique ways, from all land animals. We're very different, and that can't have happened accidentally. Survival would have developed it. We would needed this body to survive. And how did that come about? These differences are so extreme that it is remarkable that any real scientist could have ignored their importance. Yet that is exactly what they are doing. Let's start with the most obvious. Our skin. Here, our skin. Here's a quote from Charles Darwin. Quote, "No one supposes that the nakedness of the skin is of any direct advantage to man," unquote. If you have watched the Nova documentaries, you will listen to all kinds of sad attempts to explain away this problem by various anthropologists using very tortured logic, trying to make our naked skin some sort of survival advantage. If it's a survival advantage, shouldn't others have adopted it? Yet shouldn't the fact that our naked skin, which is so obviously different from other land animals, that it should shout out to the Darwinists this question? Quote, if no other land animal has anything similar, then what environment created how we came to be so naked? These anthropologists refuse to see what is right in front of their eyes, our skin. Charles Darwin linked humans with aquatic mammals when he stated, quote, another most conspicuous difference between man and the lower mammals is the nakedness of the skin. Whales and porpoises, dugongs and the hippopotamus are naked, unquote. Fact. Nearly all naked animals are in some degree aquatic. Fact. Nakedness under a hot sun, and a hot African sun, does not cool an animal. If you shave the hair off the back of an animal, its core temperature will go up, not down. Fur is the ideal insulator for land mammals. Our naked skin lined with fat, and that's very unusual, that lining with fat, is an asset only in a water environment. So let's follow some more facts. The linkage of humans to aquatic creatures does not stop at the surface of the skin. The linkage to an aquatic existence is repeated over and over, all over and inside our bodies. Inescapable linkages. I do statistical analysis. If the nakedness of the skin was the sole issue, we couldn't make any definite conclusion based upon that single item. But with fact following fact, as I will list here, an aquatic ancestor becomes an irresistible conclusion. Let's start with the next obvious item that the anthropologists refuse to see, even though it is right in front of their eyes. Our erect posture. You can't miss it. Like the skin, we're standing straight up. The silliness of the Nova documentaries is the anthropologists trying to claim that our erect posture, running on two legs, was developed in hunting the great African herds on the African savanna. Only one little teeny-weeny problem. The African savanna did not exist at that time of our last common ancestor. The savanna and the great herds is a more recent development than from when our human ancestor first appeared. Therefore, we can simply dismiss those NOVA programs about those great hunters on the African savanna entirely out of hand, at least as regarding how our erect posture developed. The hunting on the savanna did occur, but much later in the time of Homo erectus. Fact, no other animal or on land or in the sea habitually resorts to this erect mode of locomotion. Nobody. It is utterly unique. How our erect form of locomotion came about, therefore, must have also been completely unique. Is it not obvious that something absolutely astounding taking place in the environment must have occurred which forced this unusual mode of locomotion upon our original ancestor. And the proper word used in that last sentence is forced, as it is not an advantage to be erect in terms of locomotion. Otherwise, we would not be alone in having that method of going from point A to point B. There would be dozens, if not hundreds, of other creatures would have found that to be a successful form of motion. So how did we end up with this unique erect form of locomotion? This is the question that has to be answered properly under the correct conditions. Quote, by far the most common cause of speciation, the creation of species, is a period of geographical isolation. Full isolation, not a little isolation. Geographical isolation. You're in a separate place. Speciation without separation is so rare that Ernst Mayr doubted whether it really ever happened, ever occurred, unquote. Quote, among larger mammals, the commonest cause of geographical isolation is a sheet of water, unquote. Fact, Lucy's bones were found in the Afar Triangle. What is unique about the Afar Triangle that makes it so important in the story of human origin? The Afar Triangle is a unique place where the Indian plate, the Arabian plate, and the African plate all meet. It is one of the most active tectonic locations on the Earth's surface with lots of volcanoes. The Afar Triangle is the underportion of what remained of the Arabian Peninsula at the mouth of the Red Sea, which suddenly split apart from the African plate, with the Red Sea suddenly flooding much of the Afar Triangle, which is below, or the below portion below that Arabian plate that pulled apart, with the water flooding that area like a tidal wave. The Afar Triangle today is a mostly arid region, very arid, including the Dialectical Alps and the Dialectical Depression, which is a relic of the flooded area, a depression on the land that is now some 509 feet below sea level and filled with the salt that remains from the ocean created from the sudden burst of the sea that entered the Afar Triangle when the split from Africa occurred. The Dialectical Alps remained above sea level after the flood, but remained isolated as an island away from the African continent for an extensive period until the Afar Triangle's link with the ocean dried up millions of years later. Any primate, after that tidal wave, after that flood came in, isolated on that island, now separated from the African continent, was now living under conditions which create the possibility of rapid speciation, as described previously, separated by water. Darwin showed how islands separated by large bodies of water created the conditions for rapid speciation. Question: is there direct evidence that a human descendant lived on that island? No. But it is a likely location because it meets the many requirements that the following evidence points to. One, we need a location in or near the East African Rift Valley, where almost every bone has been found. Of every fossil. We probably need a location near where Lucy's body was found, in the Afar Triangle, which is at the north end of the East African Rift Valley. We need a location that is sufficiently separated from the African continent that was away from contracting the baboon retrovirus, something that I will be getting to shortly. 4, we need, I believe, a location that is adjacent to the ocean, due to the need for the availability of year-round sufficient food of high energy value, which I will also deal with shortly. This last requirement may or may not have played a role in the development of Homo erectus 2.5 million years ago. I'll get to that possibility at the end of my talk. The isolated Dialectical Alps, separated from the African mainland by that sudden flood several million years ago, fills the bill as a likely location. Could be others, but this is the one that seems to fill the bill, where our most distant ancestor was likely to have been born. Let me give you some more facts to show you that erect posture could not have originated on land. Quote, all the animals which have abandoned quadrupedalism, or moving on 4 feet, have done it because they have abandoned walking on the ground, unquote. The earliest bipeds, our ancestors, our Homo ancestors, that is, that date back before Homo erectus, back to our original ancestor, did not run the way we did, fully erect. They used a gait which the experts call BHBK, bent hips, bent knees. That mode of locomotion, that form of locomotion, is far more energetically costly and unstable than our modern form of bipedalism. Our original ancestor could not have efficiently run either after game or away from predators. When we run, we use far more energy than a quadruped does. Yet our human ancestor running BHBK would have used even far more energy in a far less efficient manner. So why would our evolutionary forces, for survival purposes, have found BHBK to be an advantage to that ancestor? It wouldn't. It couldn't have. Survival on land with a mode of locomotion of BHBK would be highly unlikely. What environment would have an erect posture been an advantage? Answer, really only in shallow water, by the ocean or the river's edge, by wading into it. And when you wade, you're standing erect. There must have been something that threatened our ancestors' very survival to force it to wade into water. Why would wading be required for survival? The Dialectical Alps are mostly barren today, and likely then as well. Food scarcity forces all animals, when they move, when they have scarcity, they move. They move to areas where food is more available. But what if moving is prevented? Because you're on an island. A group of intelligent primates, finding themselves suddenly isolated on a mostly barren island, separated from Africa by a vast ocean, would have had to find the only food available. and it would be at the ocean's edge. Most primates, when crossing streams, I'm not talking about our ancestors, I'm talking about all our primate relatives. When most primates, when they cross streams or rivers or go into a swamp, they use the erect posture. It's the most efficient way to do it under those conditions. Wading is not something that primates cannot do. They do it. For a primate isolated on such an island, the process of evolution would have given survival advantage to the best waders and swimmers. Our erect posture makes no sense any other way, because no other mammal has adopted such a posture. If an erect posture were an evolutionary advantage, there would be dozens, if not hundreds, of other mammalian species which would have adopted it. If it is such an advantage, why haven't gorillas and chimpanzees and lions and tigers adopted an erect posture? They didn't, simply because an erect posture is a big survival disadvantage for both prey and predator land and mammals. One minor note: there is only one area on the human body that has luxurious hair on it. The top of your and my head. Well, unless you're bald, okay. But on the top of all our heads, especially when we're young, my question to you, what area of our body is exposed to the African sun, the hot African sun, when wading in chest-deep water? You got it, the top of your head with the hair on it, needed to protect from the sun's heat. What other land mammal has such an arrangement of its fur? None. It's another uniqueness for us that points in only one direction. Fact: Lucy's bones, that fossil born in the Afar Triangle, which we're talking about, were found eroding from sand, which also contained the remains of crocodile eggs and turtle eggs and crab claws, unquote. Fact: quote, almost all the Rift Valley hominid fossils are the remains of creatures who died by the water's edge, unquote. The anthropologists can complain all they want about the fact that the water's edge is a natural place to find any remains. But it is a very weak argument, especially due to the fact that the entire East African Rift Valley is filled with the lakes and rivers that were created by the same tectonic process that created the Afar Triangle. It is an area of enormous tectonic activity. I do not think that it is an accident that our species was created in such an area of violent and sudden environmental change. Fact: all primates native to Africa carry a retrovirus. All primates native to Africa carry a retrovirus which protected their ancestors from the baboon infection, the plague, when it was at its most virulent, unquote. All primates native to Africa. That's us. Our ancestors are native to Africa. However, there is one African primate that does not carry the baboon retrovirus. Who could that be? Oh, me and you, we don't carry it. How is that possible? Every single one, every primate in Africa at the time got it. And it was a plague, and you couldn't have avoided it. Well, that means that our ancestor was not living on the African continent at that time. Could not have been. It's impossible. It had to be elsewhere. Yet it is clear from all the Homo remains, all the fossils found, that those ancestors lived in the East African Rift Valley and the Afar Triangle where Lucy was found. Question. At that time, what was far enough away from the African mainland, yet still part of the Afar Triangle, not that far away, and is part of Africa now? It was the Dialectical Alps. Today part of the African continent, but at that time was an isolated island in the Red Sea. Now let's look at the next issue. Just slightly further. Let's look under the skin. There are two classes of mammals which are liable to accumulate large quantities of adipose tissue. That's a fancy word for fat. They are either the hibernating mammals and the aquatic mammals. However, the hibernators only do so seasonally. Only, for when they have to hibernate. Aquatic animals are the only ones that have large quantities of adipose fat year-round. 12 months out of the year. Only the aquatic animals. Except there's one more. One more. So there isn't an only. And it's a supposedly non-aquatic species. You can guess it. Yes, it's me and you, the human. Gee, that link seems kind of obvious, doesn't it? But they don't notice it. And I'm not talking about your fat belly. Our fatness is a human feature. It's under all our skin, as distinct as our naked skin itself, and as distinct as our bipedalism, and all these features, the naked skin, erect posture, and fatness, have only one thing in common: a water environment. There is this unique fat it's a unique set of fat under the human skin. Most marine animals have a thick layer of fat under the skin, and smaller freshwater aquatics, like the beaver, typically have a higher proportion of body fat than their nearest non-aquatic relatives. In our case, we have 10 times the number of fat cells for a mammal of averaging our similar size. And we do not resemble the primates in any way in this matter. A.H. Schultz wrote that infant monkeys and apes, quote, resemble in their faces emaciated and toothless old men, but human babies are born well padded with a remarkable amount of subcutaneous fat, unquote. Quote, a well padded human baby can float on the surface of the water without any support, unquote. Why would that be? Some babies have even been videoed enjoying swimming. Why would that be too? Okay. Quote, Rose Frisch stated that if a woman's adipose tissue, her fat, constituted less than 17% of her body weight, she ceases to menstruate and cannot reproduce. 17%. Yet in many wild animals, they remain perfectly healthy and reproductive with less than 3% body fat. out on the non-existent savanna where the anthropologists roam, along with the non-existent great herds at that time, this enormous amount of fat would have been a huge disadvantage to our ancestor. Our ancestor would have been slowed down both in fleeing predators and chasing prey by the extra weight of the fat it carried. In addition, a fat baby that is also utterly helpless and incapable of walking or even grabbing the fur onto her mother's naked body would have been a huge disadvantage for the survival of any female primate. The ancestor female, if she were on land, running erect, would have to carry this fat and heavy baby in her arms while trying to escape predators, while running BHBK, bent hip, bent knees. Don't make no sense to me. She'd have been easy prey. A quadrupedal primate on all fours with a baby that isn't born so helpless and fat can quickly escape predators with the baby clinging to the fur on its mother's back. Carrying the extra weight of the ancestor's body fat is also energy expensive. Carrying that extra weight makes no sense for the survival. It needs even more food to survive because it's carrying all that weight. Nonsense. Our human ancestor walking erect while carrying that extra weight, while covered by naked skin under the African sun, that would have caused them to sweat profusely, wasting a prodigious amount of water, does not make a lot of sense for a land mammal that originated far away from a substantial body of water. Mark Verhagen said that humans have to drink more water than any other terrestrial mammal. Dehydration of about 10% may be fatal to humans, whereas most animals can rapidly recover from a dehydration of double that amount of 20%, which suggests that man evolved where water was permanently and abundantly available. The issue of overheating in land mammals is handled almost uniquely by humans. Again, we're unique. Just in case you don't know, everything is unique. And here we go again. Our ape relatives deal with heat by panting, as do almost all other land mammals. Only in rare and extreme situations do humans pant. We sweat. We sweat enormous amounts of water from our bodies when out in the hot sun. So why did we give up panting? What forced us to give up panting? Really, because survival of the fittest, that means you got forced to do this. So, and everybody else is panting, so that is the survival way. This is not a minor artifact. This is a major difference that is linked to our method of breathing. Breathing, that's kind of fundamental too, isn't it? And the anthropologists haven't noticed that we do breathe differently. I think they see it, they just don't, the brain don't accept it. Why haven't the anthropologists noticed this obvious difference? Would not Charles Darwin immediately have inquired as to why this came about? This difference must have survival importance for our species. It is not accidental. We must have given up panting for a survival reason. It is not some inherited artifact that can be ignored. But these well-trained anthropologists do so anyways. Breathing is a fundamental act. How we breathe tells us a lot about our ancestors. Breathing is different for an aquatic mammal from a land mammal. Aquatic animals must be able to hold and control their breath. Isn't that obvious? They must be able to hold and control their breath when in water and diving. Land animals do not have such a need. They don't have to dive and to swim. They don't need to have to control their breath. Land mammals, for the most part, are nose breathers that cannot control their breathing, while humans, while running or swimming, are mouth breathers, and we can control our breathing. When the doctor asks for us to hold our breath, we do so, something an ape cannot do. It is why an ape cannot talk, even if it so desired. Our descended larynx is key to the human breathing control. The descended larynx has only been found in, guess again, what type of animal? The dugong, the walrus, and the sea lion. What's in common? Oh yes, they're all aquatic. This shows that the link to an aquatic origin for the descended larynx is completely obvious. Yet these wonderfully trained anthropologists fail to see it again. What is right in front of their eyes? Once again, the brain only sees what it is trained to see. The brain, these are single cell animals. They're not very intelligent in there, no matter how many you have. And they have to be trained to see things. And once again, the brain only sees what it is trained to see. Our neurons are very conservative single cell and unintelligent animals. The descended larynx allows for breath control. In the gorilla and all the primates, the larynx, as in most mammals, is at the back of the mouth, preventing food from the mouth to enter the windpipe. In humans, the descended larynx creates a situation where the entrance to the food canal and the windpipe lie side by side. Charles Darwin thought that this was a crazy arrangement which would allow food and drink to cause choking and food to enter the lungs. There is only one environment where mouth breathing and control of breathing is an advantage to a mammal. That advantage is only gotten in an aquatic environment, in swimming and diving, in order to gulp large quantities of air. The only species, and not only gulp it, but to hold it when you're diving. The only species that share with us the ability to take a deep breath to control our CO2 levels are diving species of aquatic birds, aquatic reptiles, and aquatic mammals. Well, there's a strange link again. The diving response, breath control, in fact, of trained human divers is similar in range to the beaver and the otter. What's the similarity? They're also aquatic, aren't they? Oh, yeah. Now let's move on to the sense of smell. All right, we're covering everything in the body, and it all links one way. Irresistible conclusions. One irresistible conclusion it links towards. Whales and dolphins have discarded the sense of smell. It is of no use to them. They have no olfactory bulb in their brains. So what's with the olfactory bulb in humans? You guessed it. Our olfactory bulb is less than half the size of the gorilla and the chimpanzees. The sense of smell would have been of less use for our aquatic ancestors than for our primate relatives. Oh, you think I'm at the end? Not yet. Now let's look at the human hair on our bodies. Oh, the human hair is also going to link us to aquatic? Yeah. You guessed it. We have as many hair follicles as our primate relatives, but the hair that emerges does not extend very far from the follicles, but they're there. We got just as many as they do. It's the orientation of the hair that emerges from the follicles that is once again unique. Again, that magic word, the unique among the primates, and is in opposition to almost all other mammals. We are just a body full of unique. None of our human hair grows in the same direction as the hair of our primate relatives. Their hair grows in a different direction entirely. Instead, our bodily hair growth direction, the direction of the hair, actually flows in the same direction as water flows around our bodies. Oh, gee, why would that be? Oh, yeah, I can't guess it. I guess I just don't know. Maybe you could venture a guess as to why that might be. Ah, is that enough? No, we got more to go. Now let's take a look at our blood. Yes, the blood's different too. Marine mammals have a reduced number of red blood cells per unit volume. And we do too. Chimpanzees have an average of 7.3 million red cells per cubic millimeter of blood. Gorillas, a little less at 6.3 million, and humans, far less, at just 5.1 million red cells. Aquatic mammals have a higher hemoglobin content per unit volume than is found in land mammals of similar size. And we follow right along. The percentage of hemoglobin per cell is about 12.2 for chimpanzees, a little higher for gorillas at 13.2, and a whopping 18.6 for humans. And again, we're like those ornery aquatic mammals. So even our own blood, in terms of red cells and hemoglobin, is shifted in the direction of aquatic animals and away from our own ape relatives. Last but not least, our brain. And this is not so much, there's a partial attachment here towards the aquatic, and it has to do with the food. But since it is linked, I must include it here because it is so different from our brain, is also unique away from our primate ancestors, and the requirement for how it got so large is part of this story, and it's likely to have had an aquatic origin based on the food needs of this brain. This is an intriguing, and it's a more difficult subject than all the previous that I gave you. In terms of how our brains developed, it's the extremely greedy, energy-intensive organ that it has become, using up 25% of our entire body's energy. Susanna Herculano-Jose wrote a wonderful book entitled The Human Advantage, MIT Press. She actually dedicated herself to count the number of brain neurons that humans have, and she found that our brains have about 86.1 billion neurons on average. She also tried to figure out how it was possible for the human brain to get so large. The brains of our ape relatives are limited to 300 cc simply because there is no way that their diet of raw foods could supply enough energy, at least the raw foods on land, could supply enough energy to allow for their brain to evolve any further than 300 cc. It's just not possible on that diet. While a larger brain would have allowed for greater intelligence, and a better survival capability, just was no way that their diets of raw foods could supply enough energy to permit any increase in brain size, brain growth beyond the 300 cc limit. In her wonderful book, she believed that she solved this energy problem because the brain started so quickly to increase in size with Homo erectus, which began to take place simultaneously with the discovery of fire, which then led to cooking of the food, which then allowed the release of enough energy for use by this greedy brain, greedy growing brain, because cooking food is a form of pre-digestion of the food, allowing the digestive system greater access to the energy contained in that food. And it's a wonderful and it's a full explanation of what happened with Homo erectus after, but only after, the discovery of fire and cooking. And that is where I have a problem with that part of the story. I agree that cooking food enabled the brain to grow after the discovery of fire and the development of the cooking. But I find that is putting the horse before the cart, however. No ape with those 300 cc's at the max has any ability to discover fire, to use fire, let alone take the next step and develop the technique of cooking using that fire. That is far beyond any of the creatures that we know of that have that limitation, that size brain. For those separate innovations, those two separate innovations, you already have to have a brain that's larger than 300 cc's. And that cannot have happened on the African savanna. It's impossible. It is clear from the fossil record that Homo erectus is the ancestor that the brain increase started with. There is no argument from me on that. However, its brain must have started to increase prior to the discovery of fire and to the cooking of food. And that's not possible on the savanna. The cooking of food is what led to Homo erectus developing into the hunter on the savanna and moving away from an aquatic environment and allowing for the huge increase in brain size. But that happened second, not first. That happened after. So how did the brain start to get a little bit bigger? How could it? If they hadn't found fire, they hadn't developed the use of fire, hadn't developed cooking. Okay. So, what's the problem on the savanna? What's the biggest problem? Because away from water, the Homo erectus would have been away from any abundant food source that is available year-round, that brain needs. There's a big food requirement. It can't be solved on the savanna. The food on the savanna is seasonal. And in many parts of the year, the food available is extremely slim. The brain's needs are constant and could not have been met on the savanna where the food availability varies enormously. So something had to happen first, and it could only have happened where there was a constant, abundant, and good source of food readily available and easily digestible, and that ain't on the savanna. And in addition, and even worse so, an abundant food supply, constant, would have especially been needed by any pregnant and nursing females. It's an impossibility for an animal prior to the discovery of fire. A large brain requires constant feeding, but Homo erectus must have, at the start, have had a brain larger than 300 cc's to master fire and invent cooking. How do we solve this chicken and egg dilemma? The only solution that comes to mind is that there must have been a source year-round of abundant, high-quality, easily digested food where Homo erectus or an immediate predecessor that led to him lived, that permitted a small increase in brain size that then led to the discovery of fire and to cooking. The only place to find such an abundant food source that is available year-round is on the coastal waters of the continental shelf in tropical latitudes. Once again, an aquatic origin rears its head. Only one problem: Homo erectus began its existence only 2.5 million years ago, many millions of years after our original ancestor. It's an interesting, going from there to there. What this says to me is that the aquatic ape period was not a momentary event. It says to me that there is a direct line from our original ancestor to Homo erectus. Homo erectus may have hunted on the savanna, but Homo erectus could not have started out that way. The clue that Homo erectus may still have been at least semi-aquatic, and maybe more than semi-aquatic, comes in its nose. Yep, now we're down to the nose. You thought I got everything, right? Okay, now we got the nose. Our noses point downwards, towards the chin, while most Old World primates' noses point forward, and New World primates' noses point out to the sides. So we have this uniqueness again. Our noses have a nasal spine that causes the nose to point downwards. That spine serves a useful purpose. For what? For humans who dive head first into water or swim below the surface. It prevents water from being forced up into the nostrils, which would happen to our ape relatives. Gee, what a nice coincidence. In humans, the bridge of the nose acts like a prow in the water, deflecting the water to the side. Yes, even our noses point to an aquatic ancestor. So why does this constitute a link to Homo erectus? This nasal spine wasn't there in our original ancestor. It only arrives about 2.5 million years ago, exactly around the time of the beginning of Homo erectus. They arrive at the same time, the spine and the species. It is Homo erectus, or the very immediate predecessor of Homo erectus, that discovered fire and its use in cooking, which only then allowed for the huge increase in brain size that quickly developed. The nasal spine, in my thinking, may also indicate that the act of diving was a recent development for Homo erectus and may not have been existing so much with the BHBK people. And they have some link with that southern beginning of brain growth with the activity of diving, allowing them to get better quality food. Homo erectus walked more erect than our original ancestor that used the bent hip, bent knees, BHBK form of locomotion. Homo erectus was more like us in this respect, with a more erect posture. Perhaps this greater erect posture also led to a greater efficiency in its ability to both dive and swim. I do not see an alternative explanation of why the nasal spine only appeared along with Homo erectus. Now I've ended. I leave it there at this. There's probably more things I could add, but I'm going to leave it there. I hope that I have given you enough to think about on this question. For myself, I cannot see any alternative theory to challenge the aquatic ape hypothesis. Again, let me thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my presentation of these facts surrounding our human origins. Again, thank you.